You may have heard the term linguistic landscape and ask yourself, how can linguistic combine with landscape? Is a landscape about land or painting of a view? Yes, actually, we can combine linguistic and landscape, as Landry and Bory in their seminal work defined. So here's the first meaning of linguistic landscape: the visibility and salience of languages on public and commercial signs in a given territory or region, which means that linguistic landscape is about the appearance of languages in public areas, like words, signs, or images that we read on the public signs in the streets. Another meaning of linguistic landscape can be as simple as the definition that Gorter mentions in his work, that is, a collection of signs with text inside urban areas. That's why most studies on linguistic landscape centered on public spaces in urban, not in rural areas. The other meaning of linguistic landscape is the study of text as appearing in different or various languages on public signage. The last point takes us to why linguistic landscape has attracted many linguists. As a matter of fact, linguistic landscape of a place can demonstrate how language represents power of the dominant group or of a ruling party. Besides that, specifically in multilingual communities, linguistic landscape can be a display of how languages are used descriptively. Also, we can see evidence of people's creativity with language to communicate a variety of messages in linguistic landscape. The next question is, how then we can do a linguistic landscape study? In general, research on linguistic landscape has given us some common or basic steps, that is, to determine the research area, to understand what sign is, to collect or taking pictures of public signs, to code the collected public signs, and finally, to interpret what they want to tell us. In the first step, we may decide which area we want to take, depending on our research objective. Do we want to focus on the central or strategic point like main streets or shopping streets? Or do we want to pay attention to the official points such as public transportations? Or are we interested at the use of various languages in the center of the city or suburbs? Or do we want to include all the parameters, as in the tourism resorts? So, research areas need to be selected first. Actually, at the same time, we also need to understand what sign is. Landry and Bory mentions that signs can be public road signs, advertising billboards, street names, place names, commercial shop signs, and public signs on government buildings. And Backhouse defines sign as any piece of written text within a specially definable frame, including anything from handwritten stickers to huge commercial billboards. Understanding what sign is will help us restrict our collection of signs. Why is that important? Well, because we need to refer to our goal of study, and because there can be hundreds or even thousands of signs just in one place. That's why we can select which signs to include and exclude in our study. The criteria for that can be the placement, ownership, dynamic, and number of the signs. For any restriction we make, remember, we must know and be able to explain the rationale of our choices. The next step is coding signs, and we can follow several types of coding, but in this video, we will only present 3 of them. The first one, we can code the collected signs into regulatory, infrastructural, commercial, or transgressive, all of which following Scullin and Scullin's discourse of public signs. The second one, we can follow Ben Revell and his colleagues' coding variables, namely, the ownership of the sign, the field, language choice, and language saliency. Or maybe the third one, we can use simpler variables like language, location, and domain of the science, all of which are used in Lauren's study on Korean linguistic landscape. For any variables that we choose, we have to remain consistent. Finally, and probably the most challenging part, is where we will try to understand, using theories that we have selected, what the linguistic landscape of a place wants to tell us, or what can be revealed from the linguistic landscape of the place. Hence, we can look at the interplay between language and power, presentation of a community's identity, or how language speakers are trying to preserve their languages or are involved in language constitution. Now, you can do your own linguistic landscape research.